Hi, I'm Dana. I feel like I have more and more often over the last couple of years seen people talking about having to cut off their families and find found families, and obviously being part of like the queer community as well. It's not the most uncommon of things, and I have found myself in that position. I cut my family off back in April of 2022, and I haven't spoken to them since. And it's one of those things that is like a very big deal because it's not something that most people go through, not something most people deal with. I feel like the conversation around it, for one, it just like isn't there for the people like me that kind of really need it. You know, like I have dealt with it to a point, like we're a year and a half out now, but like I definitely still need like support and discussion around it, and I definitely needed it, like 3 years ago when I was still very much in the situation. I wanted to take this video to sort of talk a little bit about the reasons that I decided it was time to cut them off, and sort of some of like the retrospective things around that, and times that I think I should have done it sooner and like. So it is going to be quite personal and vulnerable and very about me. It's another one of the types of videos where it's here to be relatable to the people that need it, and if you don't need it, it might not be that interesting, it might be honestly quite boring. So getting into it, a little bit of backstory is that my family were not the best when I was growing up. I wasn't diagnosed autistic until I was 22. My oldest brother was diagnosed autistic in childhood. My middle brother was the mischief maker of the family and the golden child to my mother. He could not do anything wrong for my mum. And my parents were often quite emotionally neglectful. And I think that's the first point that I want to touch on, because I feel like a lot of people excuse their parents' behaviour, sometimes rightfully so. But I've had people comment on other videos when I've touched on this, saying like, oh, but your parents didn't mean to, they were just trying their best, they were just doing what they thought was right. Completely, yeah. They were absolutely trying their best, but it wasn't good enough. And the way that they treated me and the way that they behaved around me and the things that they allowed to slide within my family, especially abuse from my brothers, was not okay. Like, my brothers are 8 and 9 years older than me, and they would physically hurt me as a child, and my parents would be like, well, what did you do to him? And it's like, I said something that annoyed him. It doesn't, like, it gives him no right to hurt me anyway, but especially when he's 17, 18, 19 and I'm still a child. But I think the main reason that a lot of people sort of excuse and don't think it's that bad, and definitely don't think it's bad enough to warrant cutting off my family, is that I think those types of situations are very, very normalised. And especially within the family unit, we just massively make it seem as though that's the completely normal, valid family dynamic that lots and lots of people have. And it was as I got older and spoke to more people and experienced all the types of family dynamic that I was like, this is really not okay. Like, I had a lot of the situations where I'd be with a group of people and we'd be sharing childhood stories, and I'd be like, oh, I should share this one that my family talk about all the time. And when my family talk about it, everyone's laughing and it's like a fun, nice, happy memory for us as a family. And then I'd tell it to people and they'd be like, oh my God, are you okay? That is horrible. Why would your family do that to you? And I'm there with a smile on my face being like, no guys, this is like a funny childhood story of mine. Like, some of the lighter ones are, my mum loved sharing when we had really heavy snow and my brother just shoved the entire roof's worth down on top of me when I was like 3 or 4 years old, and there's a picture of me in just like snow up to my neck crying. And looking back on that now, I'm like, yeah, that's not funny, that's not okay, that was really mean. Like, I don't remember it happening, but looking at my face in that picture, I clearly wasn't laughing with them, I clearly wasn't having a good time. But it was repeated so often and normalised as this like hilarious childhood story of the time my brother shoved loads of snow on me and made me cry and probably almost made me ill. Like, you don't do that to people, it's mean. I think it was things like that and the way that my brothers were treated differently to me, and just like the general family dynamic, that really led to me growing up to be the ultimate fucking people pleaser. I would have done anything to just get a little bit of praise from anybody in my family. I did do anything, any favour that they asked of me, anything that they needed, I would do in the hopes that just one of them would be like, oh, nice one, Dan. And as I got older and like formed more of my own life, the demands just kept on coming and they just kept on getting bigger, and it would be things that were just unnecessary and silly. So like, my middle brother's the only one that I was speaking to at this point. I cut off my older brother a long time ago for, being physically abusive to me when I was a child. But we all had to play happy family and keep up the charade. So even though I literally didn't speak to him and didn't interact with him, no one really noticed because he didn't live in the area. So he wasn't about all the time. So I just didn't have to pretend he existed, But then my middle brother was the type that was always up to some sort of like scheme or project or something, that he was not going to complete. He never completed a thing. So I would end up in his car with him for like 4 or 5 hours each way to pick up engines, to pick up car parts. And he would always insist that he needed me there because I'm so strong and I can lift things. And he knew what he was doing. It's the thing like when in primary school they'd be like, we need a big strong boy to carry this table, and you'd have like all the girls being like, I can do that. It was the exact same thing as that. So I'd sit in his car for 5 hours on the way to fucking wherever, and we'd get out and the fella selling him the engine would look at me up and down and be like, I'll help you get it in the car. So it was completely pointless me going anyway. And then we'd have the 3, 4, 5, 6 hour drive home. And then I'd have to help him get the fucking engine through the house. And like, he didn't do anything for me, you know? Like, that's the thing. I went and saw my mother every single day for like several years because I lived nearby. And I was always asked for these favours and always asked for these little bits and these little pieces. And every now and again, I wouldn't have any money and I'd be given a few bags of food, or I'd be earning a little bit of money to be able to buy food. And that was what was held against me. It's like, oh, but all that we do for you, can't you just do us this little favour? We do so much for you. We help you all the time. Don't be so selfish. And I'd be there like, what have you done for me? You know? And I think it's very fair that like families don't have to do things for each other. But when you're consistently being asked for favours and having things used against you, what have you done for me that means that I'm supposed to take up an entire day doing something that I don't need to be there for just so you have a bit of company because you'd be bored on the drive there? You know, it was just taking advantage of my people-pleasing aspects that they'd inlaid in me since childhood. It was taking advantage of the fact that I wanted my family, you know? I wanted a nice family that liked me and that I liked. Which brings me to my next point, which I feel like there has to be more people that have dealt with this than I've seen. I haven't seen anybody else speak about this when it comes to cutting out your family. But I got to a point where I could not have a pleasant conversation with them. They're already just the types of people that will predominantly complain. Like, I would get there, I'd have my cuppa, and the complaints would start, the complaining would begin. Oh, it's too cold today, or the weather's doing this, or the postman said this, or someone up the road did this. It was these like constant complaints. And I'd try to intercept something cheerful, maybe it never worked, so I very quickly stopped trying to insert anything. And obviously I'm autistic, so I mask a lot, and especially when I'm around people who I don't necessarily feel comfortable around, especially like despite them being my own family, not especially, despite them being my own family, I wasn't very comfortable. So I'm massively masked and I'm very much mirrored, and I replicated their behaviour back at them. And I would also complain. I'd be like, oh yeah, it is way too cold, oh I'm so sick of this rain, oh I haven't got any money, I haven't eaten this in ages, I wish I had this to eat. You know, I would complain along with them. But the difference between their complaining and my complaining is that I was doing it because they were doing it, and they would use anything I said as a way to get back to how it's, well, that's because of the Tories, that's because of all the immigrants that are coming in, oh, that's because of the trans people. Like, anything I had to say about the world, about my situation, about any of it, had to come back to some sort of, it's this minority's fault, you just need to hate that minority. And as much as they would sometimes blame the Tories, they also voted for the Tories, which is odd because I feel like you can probably tell from the accent and the like, I'm not from a Tory family. My entire family voted Labour for years, which I also think is silly. I think you should vote for whoever you think will do the best at the given moment. But my whole family had become Tory voters, which we had never been before. And it was very much that sort of brainwashing of the working class that we are seeing in the UK, you know, having it all point towards like, oh no, it's not that you're in a shit job because you didn't get any qualifications and you generally don't try, which obviously is not the case for everyone, but was for my brother and the other members of my family. You know, it couldn't possibly be their fault. It had to be all these immigrants coming over and stealing their jobs. Editing Dana here, because that aspect of things is still especially weird to me, I just wanted to add, because me, my mother, brother and my dad at the time all moved to Denmark for several years when I was younger. Like, we were the people that were like, oh, we can move to this country and have a better life over here, and it didn't work out, but we did it, you know? We were the people that were moving into someone else's country and taking their jobs. And obviously I think the entire concept is bullshit, but we as a family literally did the thing that they were complaining about other families doing. And especially considering we went from the UK to Denmark, you know? It's not like we were like, admittedly it was like during the recession, it was during a bad time for the UK, but we weren't like, we need to move or we're gonna die. You know, it wasn't like there's a war here and we need to not be in a war zone. We would have been fine. And yet it's a level of hypocrisy that I really could not stand, honestly. And the more outspoken they became with those things, the more I just would sit there and be like, who are you? You know? Like growing up, I really looked up to my mother. I thought she was really smart. I thought she was really pretty. I thought she was just like this all round brilliant person. You know, as I think most people think their parents are. And it was just watching her become this really like bitter, twisted, racist, just mean person. And I do largely blame my brother. I do think he massively like forced his opinions and his general shittiness onto her. But she also was a full-grown adult that was making those decisions and choosing to live with her full-grown son and so on and so forth. So that was already really fucking horrible because they're obviously not the types of people that I would choose to spend time around, and suddenly I was having to because they were my family. And, you know, obviously racism doesn't actually affect me. You know, as much as I'm like, it makes me so uncomfortable to hear my family speaking like this, it doesn't actually affect me, it doesn't actually hurt me. The thing that did hurt me was when I had a girlfriend, and despite my older brother being gay and having had many boyfriends and partners before, who were all his boyfriends and his partners when my parents and my other brother spoke about them, when I got a girlfriend, she was my best friend. She was my gal pal. She was just my BFF. Not once did I hear a member of my family refer to her as my girlfriend, and they were very, very aware that she was. I introduced them to her, her to them as my girlfriend. You know, like we acted like we were in a relationship because we were, and she was still just my best friend, my good old gal pal. And it was things like that, honestly, that really led to me cutting them off. You know, I feel like a lot of people, when they discuss these types of things, they have that big moment where like they came out or this thing happened and they realised that their family were never going to accept them, their family are assholes and their family are the worst people in the world. And, you know, that's also fucking horrible, don't get me wrong. But it's the thing of like the grass is always greener on the other side. And like I almost wish that I had that, because when people ask me like, so how come you don't speak to your family? I'm like, oh no, I don't have like a big reason. I don't think they are like awful people. I think that they just have lots and lots and lots of awful parts of them and awful opinions that made it incredibly difficult for me to interact with them, incredibly difficult to be around them, and especially I just did not enjoy any of my time around them. You know, every moment around them felt tense. It felt like I was on edge. It felt like fight or flight, because they were not people that I wanted to in any way interact with. They didn't have the morals that I had. They didn't have like the ethics that I had. We're just, I don't understand how we're related because we are not the same. And I think that my difficulty was knowing how many of these little things come together to create the big thing, you know? Like, it very much reached the point where I was like, I feel anxious going to see my family. I don't want to see them. I don't really consider them to be family. There's no relatable factor here. They don't seem to like me. I don't like them. But it felt like you know, you had like a big jug here. Other people that have like a big bad thing, like they aren't accepted when they come out, or their family are like genuinely horribly abusive and not like kind of a bit shitty. Like, as much as I'm like, I experienced abuse, I don't feel like they were abusive, you know? I don't feel like it was intentional. I don't feel like they were like, fuck this kid. It just sort of happened because of the family dynamics, and it was an abusive situation, but they aren't, I wouldn't call them abusers, and that might still be me processing and working through things. But you know, like when that gets put in the jug's full and it's very obvious that like it's time to do something. But when it's just like drops and drops and drops and drops, you get that like surface tension where it starts to like overflow the jug, but it's not actually pouring out. And it's like, so is the jug full or not? So for me, the final straw, the like really big horrible moment was, okay, this is kind of trauma dumping. You're free to tune out now if you want to, because it's technically not trauma dumping now because I've warned you and like asked for consent, so it's cool. So I had just broken up with my partner of 8 years because I was realising that he was abusive and really, really horrible. I was still having to live with him. I didn't have anywhere else to go. And he was still being very, very abusive and horrible, all the more so now I wasn't his girlfriend. In the January, bear in mind, like, so I stopped talking to my family in the April. In the January, my mum had gone into hospital. It had been a whole horrible, stressful thing where like my brother had gotten home from work and was like, where's mum? And I was like, I don't know, I haven't seen her today, because my therapist said that I need to stop being so anxious that something's going to happen to her if I don't go and see her every single day. So today was the first day that I decided to not go and see her. And my brother was like, well, she's not here, and what do I do? And I was like, call around to hospitals, don't just phone me. Like, so we rang around to hospitals, found out my mum was in the Royal. went and saw her the next day. She didn't know who I was. It was one of the most horrible and traumatic experiences of my life, just walking into this place and having my mum be like, you look like my daughter, but you're not. You're why do you look like you're not actually my daughter? Like, she was not within the same reality as us. And obviously it was fucking cancer. It was a whole medical thing that she had going on. I don't blame her for that. But it was extremely traumatic for me, and it was a horrible, horrible thing to go through. And then being sat in a room with my brother and being told, like, oh yeah, she's got 2 types of cancer and a brain tumour. We're going to be sending her in for brain surgery really soon. And then dealing with her having brain surgery and getting her home and adjusting the home. You know, it was so stressful when I already had so much going on. And it was just so beyond difficult. Like, it sounds like it, you know? It's one of those things where, like, as much as I've explained it to people and keep explaining it, I can explain it in the way that I do because it has not sunk in that was genuinely, like, what happened and, like, how traumatic and horrible it was, to be completely level with you. So this was happening in the January, and I was like, this is my time to step up. I need to be there for my family. And I also had quite a difficult conversation while the doctor's in the hospital, because he was talking to me about the brain tumour. My brother had gone off to cry somewhere, so I was having to deal with it. And he was telling me about the brain tumour, and I was like, wait, are you saying that this will have changed her personality? Like, this has altered, like, the way that her brain works to, like, process information and everything? And he was like, yeah, like, we can't say for sure, but if you've noticed a change in her in the last, like, few months to a year, that could be because of the brain tumour. And I was like, get my mum back, she's going to stop being like this, and she's going to stop being like this, and she's going to go back to being like this. And as the months progressed, that didn't happen. So I was at this point still going to see my mum every single day, while also dealing with having to try to find a new place to live, living with my really abusive ex-partner, having another relationship going on at the time, trying to maintain friendships and social life, so that I had a support system and people to talk to and ways to maintain myself. And my mum invited me to go up to her house on the day of Easter, on Easter Sunday, to have dinner. And I'd been trying to do my makeup, and I started crying, and I cried off all my makeup, and, like, my face was fucked up, so then I had to wash off all the makeup and start again. And I was having just a whole fucking morning, you know? I wasn't having a good time at all. And that meant that I was late for the lunch we were meant to have. She kept phoning me, and I was like, I'm getting ready. I will be there when I am there. Like, I am doing my fucking best here, kind of thing. And when I got there, she just started fucking shouting at me. And I understand that, like, everything I was dealing with that was stressful, like, apart from, like, my relationship stuff, was also stuff that she was dealing with. But there was just no empathy or compassion for the fact that I was the one that was having to come up every day and try to sort everything out and completely alter my life and routine to cater to this already very, very difficult thing, while also the entire rest of my life is changing. And she was just telling me that I needed to think about somebody other than myself for a change. And I was like, I have never thought about anybody but everybody else. Like, at no point in my life have I been selfish. I don't mean for, like, little things on the daily. There's definitely been times in general that I've been selfish. But towards my family, I've always done everything I can to please them, to get that phrase, like, I'm a people pleaser. And I was like, can we for one fucking moment think about me? And she said no. And that dissolved into, like, a very large screaming match where she just consistently told me, like, you're being selfish, you're not thinking about anybody but yourself, just like you never do. And I was like, I know that this is my mum, but this woman does not give a shit about me. This woman does not recognise a single thing in my life that I have done for her or the family. And I was done. Like, that was the moment where, like, it was like everything clicked into place for me. And I know that sounds like it is, like, a big thing, but, you know, like, if I had a shouting, screaming argument with one of my friends, I'd make up with them afterwards, probably, you know, depending on what they said. And, like, similarly with the things that my mum said, they're not that dissimilar to things that she screamed at me when I was a teenager. You know, like, my mum, when she's going through something stressful, is the kind of person that just takes out on whoever's around her, and that's usually me. But this time, I'd already been thinking about all of the other little things. And that was the thing that was, like, too big of a drop that made the jug just overflow. And I was like, I can't do this. This entire relationship is just detrimental to me. Like, no part of this is something that's positive for me, or something that's doing anything good for me. It is a purely negative experience, and I don't want to be a part of it anymore. And, you know, I cried about it a lot. It was really fucking difficult. I kept thinking maybe I should message her and talk about it. But then I started being happier, you know? I started being able to get my shit together more. I had more time for myself. And I realised that, like, you know, because they also told me, like, what are you going to do without us? We help you with this and this and this. We do so much for you. And I was terrified of not having that, like, help and support until I realised that I'd never had that help and support they were talking about. All that changed in my life was that I had, like, 3 or 4 hours a day that I would have been spent with my mother having a cuppa and feeling uncomfortable, where I didn't have to do that anymore. And it was lovely. And finally, I do also think that I can talk about this a bit easier and without being quite so upset, because I am in a position now where I have, like, a little found family. I've got 3 people that I'm very much like, this is my family. They're the people that treat me in the way that I believe that, like, family and like, really, really fucking good friends treat each other, you know? At the point where it becomes that family connection, that, like, this person is here for me and they support me and I'm here for them and I support them. And we have, like, the similar ethics and morals and we agree on things, and it just feels more like a family than anything I've ever had in the past, honestly. And, like, this isn't meant to encourage anybody to cut off their families and be horrible to their family or whatever else. This is just, I mean, it's more so for the people that have already been through it, if anything, I think. But it's also for the people that know it's coming and don't know when to do it and don't know how to necessarily, like, vocalise the reasons, because that's very much the place that I was in up until, like, our big argument where everything clicked into place for me. I was very like, I know that this isn't maintainable, this isn't something that I can just carry on doing, because it was exhausting and it was upsetting, but I didn't really fully realise that I could just not have to engage in it. So yeah, that's the video. As always, you can subscribe. I've got TikTok, Instagram and Twitter. If you want to donate me money, you can donate to Ko-fi, become a Patreon member or a YouTube member, but there's no pressure, you don't have to. I am making that little promotion section very, very quick, because I feel quite uncomfortable promoting myself on videos like this sometimes, but I also am aware that I sort of need to. I'm going to, like, have a career out of this, so that's what we're doing. Here's some Oatman tax to make up for it. Look at, oh, he looks quite pissed off actually. I'm sorry, little man. What if I just... He's my baby. He's purring, so he's fine with it. So yeah, whoever you are, wherever you are, having a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, and we will see you again in a couple of days.